Look, if you're tuning into this explainer, there's a really good chance you're staring out your window right now at fields that are just brown. They're hard as a rock, eaten straight down to the dirt, and you're probably standing there with this knot of anxiety, wondering if that pasture is ever going to bounce back. All while your horse, of course, is glaring at you demanding more food. Well, take a breath, because you are definitely not alone in this. Today, we're getting into the actual agricultural science of what months of severe drought have done to your ecosystem, and honestly, more importantly, what it's done to your horse. We're going to break down exactly how to manage both your land and your animals as this weather finally starts to shift.
So the panic usually sets in right away, doesn't it? You see that crunchy brown pasture and your brain goes, "Great, the whole field is completely dead." But here's the good news, and it's pretty fascinating actually. Not everything out there that's brown is dead. Cool season grasses have this incredible built-in survival mechanism. When the extreme heat and drought really hit hard, these established grasses don't just throw in the towel. Instead, they go into a state of dormancy to basically bunker down and protect whatever limited resources they have left deep inside their roots.
Okay, so what does dormancy actually mean in this context? Think of it like the plant hitting a massive pause button. It intentionally shuts down all that visible above-ground green growth so it can aggressively protect its vital crown and root systems. It is very, very different from the plant actually dying. But, and this is a massive warning here, if you let your horse keep grazing on this dormant grass, they are literally nibbling away the absolute last bits of leaf material that the plant desperately needs. Because without those little leaf remnants, the plant can't perform photosynthesis when the rain finally comes back, which completely cripples its ability to recover.
And you know, that single issue, it snowballs fast. Drought kicks off this vicious chain reaction. It starts simple enough. Less rain obviously equals less grass growth. But because the horses are still out there roaming around, that leads to way more intense grazing pressure on whatever tiny bits are left. That pressure creates deeply weakened plants, which eventually just give up, leaving you with completely bare ground. And let me tell you, nature absolutely hates bare ground. The second that soil is exposed, opportunistic weeds swoop right in to steal those gaps. Plus, because your horses are having to search so much harder for food, they end up concentrating their foot traffic in very specific areas, and that just hammers the soil structure in those spots.
Now, we can't just fixate on the field itself, because there's this entirely hidden biological mechanism happening at the exact same time. We are literally managing two ecosystems at once here. Outside the horse, sure, you've got the soil, the roots, and the plants trying to survive the drought. But inside the horse, you've got their feed, their gut microbes, and their whole fermentation process. When the drought forced you to swap them off lush grass and onto a diet of mostly hay, you didn't just change their dinner menu. You fundamentally rewired their internal gut microbiome. Those microbes inside your horse have rapidly adapted over the last few months just to survive on this very specific, limited, dry diet.
And we also have to talk about the physical toll of the heat itself, because intense heat totally shifts your horse's physiological demand, and that happens even if your riding schedule hasn't changed one bit. Horses shed a massive amount of body heat through sweating, right? Well, all that sweat means a massive loss of water and vital electrolytes, which directly impacts their muscular and nervous systems. So managing a horse through a drought isn't just about what they eat. It means you have to be hyper-vigilant about their thermoregulation, their water intake, and giving them proper recovery time, because simply existing in that environment is a heavy workload.
So you've battled the heat, you've been rationing out the hay, and then, finally, you look up and the clouds open. It rains. You watch that water soak into the cracked dirt, and you immediately think, oh, thank goodness, problem solved. The crisis is over, right?
Yeah, well, not quite. Actually, this right here is the absolute most critical turning point in this entire explainer. When that highly anticipated rain finally hits the ground, it doesn't instantly fix your pasture. Not at all. What it actually does is trigger a sudden, extremely dangerous phase for both your soil and for your horse's gut. Welcome to what we call the second transition.
If you take absolutely nothing else away from this today, please let it be this one mantra. Green does not equal recovered. When the rain hits, yeah, the soil rehydrates and you're going to see these tiny, beautiful little green shoots pop up everywhere. But new green fuzz on the dirt does not mean you have a fully recovered plant. And a flush of new grass definitely, absolutely does not mean it's safe to just throw your horses back out there for unrestricted grazing. One good rainstorm does not magically erase months of severe soil moisture deficit.
So, the big question, how long do you actually wait?
Well, agricultural extension offices are pretty unanimous on this. They strongly recommend that any drought-stressed, cool-season pasture has to be allowed to regrow to a height of about 6 to 8 inches before you even think about letting horses graze it again. And look, I know it is literal torture to look at a slightly green field and keep your horses locked off it, but you have to have the discipline to let those plants rebuild their root reserves first.
Because the real danger is what's hiding inside that brand new grass. Drought-stressed cool-season grasses can intensely accumulate what are known as NSCs, or non-structural carbohydrates. You can basically think of these like highly concentrated sugary energy drinks for the plant. When a severely stressed plant suddenly gets a big gulp of water, those NSC levels can just absolutely spike. This makes managing your pasture critically urgent right now, especially, and I mean especially, if you have a horse that's prone to laminitis or one that needs a really strict low-sugar metabolic diet.
And that perfectly tees up the danger of diet whiplash. Think about how this started. As a drought set in, you probably made a nice, gradual shift, slowly swapping out the fading grass for hay. But after it rains, if you just throw open the gates, you are forcing a violent, abrupt shift from dry hay right back to rich, sugary grass. Studies show that this kind of sudden hay-to-grass transition causes massive microbial chaos in the horse's gut. Their microbiome spent the whole summer adapting to dry forage, so tossing them onto unrestricted new grass is literally a recipe for disaster. Turnout right now has to be highly restricted and closely managed.
Okay, enough doom and gloom. What do we actually do about it? Here is your game plan for tomorrow. Before you spend a single penny on seed or fertilizer, go walk your field. Pull out your phone. Take pictures of the best grass, the worst patches, the totally bare dirt. Actually map out the damage and figure out what survived. And then take those exact same photos from those exact same spots every single week. By doing this, you aren't just crossing your fingers and guessing if the field is getting better, you're building real hard evidence of what's actually happening out there.
And while you're mapping, we need to completely bust the myth that your field is just one giant, uniform piece of land. It's not. You need to carve it up into specific zones, find your productive grazing spots, mark the areas that are hanging on by a thread and desperately need rest, and identify your high-traffic zones, like the gates and water troughs. But most importantly, you need to designate your sacrifice areas. Sometimes the absolute smartest land management strategy is actively looking at a piece of land and saying, okay, I am choosing not to grow grass here, just so you can protect the rest of the property.
Here's another tip, and it sounds kind of crazy, but it is incredibly practical. The next time it's actively raining, go outside and just watch where the water goes. Yes, your neighbors are going to think you've completely lost your mind, but do it anyway. Do a basic water assessment. See where it soaks in, where it runs off like a river, and where it just pools up into a swamp. Because if you see how the water behaves right now, you can predict exactly where your nightmare mud problems are going to be in a few months, and you can plan your traffic routes around them today.
And look, taking back control of your land does not mean you have to run out and finance a brand new tractor. There are some really effective, low-cost things you can do tomorrow. String up some temporary electric tape to block off those fragile recovering zones. Don't let your horses trample one specific spot into dust. Drag those hay feeders around regularly. Throw some rubber mats down in your gateways. Pick up the manure so they graze more evenly. Even just resting one small section of the field can make a night and day difference. It's really just about being strategic with the where and the when of your grazing.
Now, if you do find areas that are just completely, undeniably dead, do not panic buy expensive grass seed. And whatever you do, do not blindly aerate the field. Stop guessing what your soil needs and test it. A basic soil test is going to tell you the structure, the pH balance, the nutrient levels, and how compacted it is. Because think about it. If you just toss expensive new seed onto terrible, compacted dirt, you are literally just recreating the exact same conditions that killed your grass in the first place. You have to get the data first.
And you need that data fast, because we are on a serious timeline here. This is the direct path to a winter mud disaster. It started with the drought months ago, leaving the soil bare. Today, we've got autumn rains soaking into that unprotected dirt. Next week, you're going to have 1,000-pound animals with heavy hooves churning up that wet soil. And a few months from now, you've got a saturated, muddy nightmare on your hands. If you fail to plan your winter sacrifice zone right now, I guarantee you will be fighting knee-deep mud all winter. You have to decide today where your horses are going to stand when that field turns into a sponge.
So, when we step back and look at all this together, the big picture is pretty obvious. You can't just have a horse plan, and you can't just have a land plan. You need both of them working totally in sync. You literally cannot manage your horse's diet and their grazing transition if you're ignoring the rest and rotation of the soil. You can't protect your at-risk laminitic horses if you haven't built out your winter sacrifice areas. Managing the horse and managing the land are fundamentally the exact same conversation. The environment supports the horse, and the horse directly impacts the environment.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Are you just going to sit back, stare out the window at that field, and cross your fingers that the grass magically comes back? Or are you going to take action tomorrow? Will you use everything this brutal drought has exposed about your property to actually build a better, more resilient system? Because the rain didn't solve your problems. It just fired the starting gun for the real work. Go walk that field, draw up your map, and set up your sacrifice zones. Your horse and your pasture will absolutely thank you for it.